Thanks for making the time to join us tonight for our Soldier Coaches Social with coaching legends and military heroes in partnership with Team RWB. Thank you to our sponsors to include Higher Echelon, our partners to include Team RWB and Mike Erwin, who is here with us right now, USO and US Lacrosse, and the critical individual donors who allow us to support our soldier coaches. Thank you to the financial support of our individual donors. Our enterprise of soldier coaches continues to grow in 2021. And thank you for your contributions. Our legacy campaign started in November 2020 and is providing essential support to allow us to grow and deepen our support to all of you and our soldier coaches. And folks, these coaches socials are exclusive to you as soldier coaches and partners of Soldiers to Sidelines. We get to extract nuggets of wisdom from our inspirational speakers, and we get to come together as a tribe, bond with each other, and even make new connections that may lead to new opportunities. So right now, let me introduce you to our esteemed partner, Mike Erwin, founder and executive director of Team RWB. If you don't know Mike, he's a 2002 graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, where he was commissioned as an officer and went on to serve 3 combat tours with the 1st Cavalry Division and 3rd Special Forces Group. Mike continues to serve the nation as Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves, assigned to the United States Military Academy at West Point, where he is an assistant professor. He's also the co-author of Lead Yourself First. Welcome, Mike.
Awesome to be here. Harrison, really appreciate the intro. And I'm just smiling ear to ear over here, just thinking about what an awesome way it is to spend an hour on the evening, having a conversation with one of the greatest coaching college coaches in basketball ever, Coach Beilein, and then getting to listen to Matt talking about his new book. So this is awesome. I'm going to do a real quick introduction for Coach Beilein, then we're going to jump right into the conversation. It's very simple. He and I actually, come from upstate New York a long time ago. I remember first when he was the coach at Lemoyne, a small Jesuit school in Syracuse. Then he went to Canisius and then to the University of Richmond and then over to West Virginia. And then he landed at the University of Michigan. Whereas we all know, he took 2 different teams to the national championship game, a whole slew of Sweet 16 appearances. But the story that I want to tell you to introduce Coach Beilein tonight is actually one that really speaks to his character, because you can think about seeing somebody when the bright lights are shining and when all eyes are on you. But I was actually a high school junior, and he was unpacking his office at the University of Richmond, where he had just become the head coach. And my Little League baseball coach, talking about the importance of coaching, Coach Tom Nyland, a Marine who served in Vietnam, called his cousin, John Beilein, and said, "Hey, the Erwin family is coming down. Mike's looking at possibly, going to the University of Richmond." Probably the last thing in the world that he wanted to do was to take some time out of moving into his office, doing the recruiting and everything involved in the coaching space. And yet he took it over an hour of his time to give us a walking tour of campus at the University of Richmond, showed us the baseball field, did all kinds of things like that. And so that's a story that I always tell when I ever introduce Coach Beilein, because it speaks to his character and the person that he is. So Coach, it's great to have you here tonight, and just a huge honor for Team Red, White, and Blue to be a part of this with Soldiers to Sidelines. I'd love to just start off with, if you could talk a little bit about the military lineage in your family's history. Of course, I know it as someone who's known you for a while, but it's absolutely amazing. I think that's a great place for us to start the conversation tonight.
Thanks, Mike. Now, this is really cool to do. I talk with several coaches that at this level and told them what I was doing. They said, "Wow, now that's the good stuff," to be able to reach out to so many of you guys with your veterans or you're still in service and talk to you a little bit about this, because God knows we need leaders today. And the people that are, whether you're a Little League coach or a high school coach or a volleyball coach, that's who the future leaders are getting their first impression on leadership. And this is really important. So I'm in and help any way I can in the future. And thank you for the opportunity. Yeah, as Mike said, I come from a family of, you may know this, whatever. The last name is Nyland, Niland. And they lived in Tonawanda, New York. My uncle and my mom had a family of 13. So she had 2 brothers, Joe and Tom, who both were served in World War II, but their cousins that lived in the same little hamlet of Tonawanda were the 4 Nyland cousins. All 6 of them enlisted a day after Pearl Harbor. And that is the story of Saving Private Ryan, that my mother's 3 of her cousins were reported to her aunt missing in action in the same week. And they found my mother's cousin, Fritz, very easily. They didn't have to go search and hold a bridge to get him, but they did. Two died on D-Day, and one was shot down in Burma around that same week of D-Day. And they thought he was dead he was missing in action. They didn't know, and he showed up 2 years later. They had no idea. But my uncle Tom, who was my mother's brother, was the absolute hero in the 101st at Bastogne, where he got shot. He got shot up there, shrapnel, and then my uncle Joe, they were all basketball people. He came in at the very end with Patton's army, and was part of the freeing of many of the concentration camps. So it's amazing. And then we go on, and my brother served in Vietnam at 19 years old. My sister was in the Army Nurse Corps. My brother-in-law flew 100 combat missions in the Air Force in Vietnam. And then I had seven of my nieces and nephews have also served with, I believe, 5, including a niece in the Green Zone in Baghdad as a major in the Army. She's a doctor. There's another that is a JAG lawyer that was in the middle of the Ebola crisis, and just have a lot of military. Did not serve myself, probably regret it, but I'm indebted to everybody, and it's an interesting story. Actually, they're going to do a movie on the real story of the Nyland family. And what's ironic is the day that my Uncle Tom came home after the war was ended, it was within days of VE Day. He came home, and his older brother, William, who was working in a steel mill, was killed that day in the steel mill. He virtually went from getting off the train, going home and see his father. And my father's brother served with Teddy Roosevelt on Bunker Hill also. So, amazing. But when he came home that day, wow, he got the report that your brother's been hurt in the steel factory, had to go. Imagine the grief these people went through, had to go from all that, he knew his cousin had been killed, and go to the widow's house. And that was his first task back from World War II, to tell his widow that the widow that she and her 3 children had just lost their father. So big lineage there, very proud of it, but a lot of heartache that we all grew up with.
Yeah, absolutely, Coach. And thanks for sharing that. I mean, it is so incredible that lineage runs so strong, especially in such a big family. I'd love to be able to start, and focus a lot of the conversation with you tonight. And of course, by the way, anyone in the chat, I'll be monitoring that. So feel free to put some questions in there. But I'd love to start the conversation on when I reconnected with you. So it was 2009. I had just finished my 3rd rotation. I was a graduate student at the University of Michigan, and we connected. And you have been at for a couple of years now. But can you talk about the importance of building a team culture? I mean, I remember seeing, the way that you would hang the words on the locker room and all that. But can you just walk through the importance of why that's so hard to do and yet so important?
Well, and we had to change it. For years, generations have changed. So I've been a head coach for 45 years. So during that time, I don't care what you say, the students have changed. And there is just a different dynamic to coaching than it was back when you could say anything you wanted to do. You were the boss, you were the king, you didn't have to answer to anybody, to these days. And your culture, it wasn't, you just you lived it and people got through it. But after 3 years at Michigan, we had only had 1 NCAA tournament, and we had a bad year, my 3rd year. And I was forced to pivot greatly and teach culture, come up with my core values, teach it to my team. And since that day, Michigan had been to the tournament 1 time in the prior 12 years. And then after we started teaching culture, living culture every single day, talking about our core values, that we took off and made, sorry about that, and made like 10 of the, we made two Final Fours, had 2 championship games, and we only missed the NCAA tournament one time, and that's when we were gutted by the pros and injuries. So it made a huge difference. But all of you that are out there coaching, if you think that you can coach now like you were coached, you're making a mistake. That everybody could have a recording going on. There are so many now, and I don't mean this in a bad way, it's just a fact that so many parents now, instead of many of us, we were prepared for the path. Today, a lot of parents today want to prepare the path for their children. And you got to change. You got to be ready for that and be ready to coach in a different manner. So, but if you know your core values, you have a self-awareness for who you are, and go to that and really teach through a very positive, we can do this approach, right? It makes a big difference. And we came upon that, Mike, and you were part of it, of really teaching positivity, but also teaching about teaching culture. And it changed our program. And nobody in the last 8 years, there's not one team in the college basketball has won more NCAA games than Michigan. And the only thing that we did differently was we really preached culture and teamwork every day. Instead of just living it, we preached it.
And Coach, and building on that, can we talk a little bit about, because I had the honor of being a part of some of the practices and seeing how you ran them, and just the energy level was through the roof. I mean, I remember going in there and just seeing the intensity of the players, and everyone was dialed in. And like, so what's the key to that? Because obviously kids want to play, they're excited, whatever the sport is that they're playing, but how do you dial up that energy for, in a practice?
I think they have energy if you're going to ready to use it. I would take, Mike, and certainly if you're an amateur coach, you don't have this time, but I would take 2 hours to plan every second of practice, literally every second, because I'd say, okay, this drill is going to go 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And then you go to the next one, because if you start doing half a minute, you might be able to get more stuff done. And then they know there's no standing around, we're engaged, but guys have fun at practice because we never stop. Once again, we are one of the things we look for in our student athletes was great teammates. And when you have great teammates, you have people, you care about who you have on the team. Don't care about who you don't have. Care about who's on that team. Then all of a sudden you can foster this environment of, we can't wait to practice today and get through it. And you can get a lot out of them that way. They don't even know how much they're running. We very rarely ran a sprint anymore, how I grew up, but our drills were much harder on their heart rate than running a sprint. But they had a ball in their hand. They had people clapping behind them. There was goals to get. It was games within the game, the future games, the whole practice long. That's how we capture that type of energy.
It was amazing. I mean, I remember feeling my own energy level rising when I would be in the gym and see it. Can you speak about another one of your core values you talked a lot about, which is accountability? Just briefly, as you talked about the challenges, today in the information age, in the social media age, there's more of that culture of people being interested in bouncing around. Like, how do you create that culture of accountability where the players, because obviously as a coach, you can hold people accountable, you can make the decision if they play or not, but how did you work to build that culture where the players, like the Zach Novaks of the world, were able to help to keep one another accountable to bringing their best self to practice?
I think by once again, if you're teaching all the aspects of culture, it's just, I mean, with all kinds of examples, from whether they're pro athletes, whether they're professionals, leader around the country, military, as you came in for us, just teaching about, you told me this, and I think all the veterans and in service people know right now, you're not necessarily over there fighting for the flag in the United States. You're fighting for your brother in that foxhole with you. And that's when you get them to, they take ownership and they fight for their teammates. They play for their teammates. Then they will be more apt to hold each other accountable. And they're not out there thinking, I got to win for Michigan and I got to win for myself anymore. No, I got dudes in this locker room that I love, and we're winning this thing together, because nothing better.
Yeah. And seeing those relationships, blossom was incredible. And speaking of relationships, Harrison, as you kind of introduced, I co-authored one book called Lead Yourself First. Well, my next book is coming out in November. It's called Leadership is a Relationship. And we have interviewed Coach Beilein in that book. One of the most powerful stories of around 25 different people that we profile. And for those of you who might follow Michigan, and I see there's a couple of people over here who are Michigan fans, which is great. But can you talk a little bit about what transpired, and giving people like a little bit of a glimpse to like that full story of, as Coach Nyland jokingly talked about, calling you Sully, but like what happened with the near-death experience and how that galvanized, your team to make an epic, almost unprecedented run.
Well, I think that it all goes back to when we started embracing this culture, we really went after this growth mindset that I grew up on a farm, and you prune trees to get bigger and better apples and bigger, better peaches. And you take fertilizer from the horses and put it around the trees. That the failure makes you greater, and it prepares you for sudden change. So we talk about it every win we saw every loss we saw as a win in some ways. Now we're going to learn from this. This is going to be tremendous. What are we going to learn? I used to not sleep after losses. I slept like a baby after losses because I knew I was going to learn so much to be a better coach the next day. So we have that ingrained in them that, man, let's not waste this adversity because it's going to make us stronger. And then what happens is every now and then you have like big time adversity. You have big sudden change. You have unemployment. You have death. You have all these things could happen. You're ready. So in 2017, we're on the bubble. If some of you know, we need to go in the NCAA tournament. We got to probably win a game to be in for sure. Win 2, absolutely in. And we're about to fly to Washington, D.C. on a charter flight, leaving out of a Willow Run Airport here in Detroit. Windy day. And bottom line is the plane gets to 200 miles an hour and can't take off. So it goes through 400 yards of mud, stops near a ledge where we're taking us down, and we're all in emergency. Get down, stay down, chute's open. Kids are taking the windows out of the back, getting the cheerleaders off, the band off. The plane was packed. I'm going down the chute, manning the chute. We're getting everybody up. We got off beautifully. And one scratch, our best player, he had like six stitches in his knee. But when we're all done, we come to this area where is everybody here? Wow, we made it. And everybody's yelling to me, sudden change. And we had preached this all the time because Bo Schembecker, the great Michigan football coach, used to get guys to understand sudden change is so big. And he would simulate, if you can imagine, he didn't coach Tom Brady, but let's say Tom Brady is marching the ball down against Ohio State. They're up, maybe they're up 14 to 7, and 4 or 5 minutes to go. It's all he's got to do is get a field goal and they win the game. And instead he throws an interception. Michigan defensive team would run off onto the field yelling, sudden change. This is what we're ready for, and go get a stop. And that's sort of what we train them. A guy gets in foul trouble. A guy's injured for the game. Sudden change, baby. Let's go. This is what we're trained to do. You guys that have served, you know what I'm talking about. Well, to make a long story short, that plane next day, we end up saying, well, you don't have to go play in this tournament. We might not be in, it's okay. They all wanted to play. We took a plane the next day. We got there late. We played in our practice uniforms because we couldn't get to our uniforms. They were embedded in the plane and we couldn't get them. We played 4 days of the greatest basketball we've ever played. We won the championship going away. We were an 8 seed, won it going away. And since that time, Michigan was 17-4 in win or go home games. Two of those games that we did not win. One of them was the national championship game, and another was the Big Ten championship game. And it galvanized us forever. And it continues on that's the way Michigan operates. Sudden change. Adversity does not bother us. We just forge on.
That's awesome, Coach. I mean, just the story, again, because I obviously knew it and followed it so well, but it really was. I mean, just an unbelievable tale when you look back at it. You think back on it. It was, 4 years ago. And I remember seeing you guys playing in your practice uniforms and all. Is this
Mike? And we won that tournament. We won the following tournament. That we then went on and and got to the Sweet 16. The following year, we won 9 straight postseason. You hear about guys getting fired because they can't win a postseason game. We won 9 in a row.
Yeah.
And postseason games, and then win or go home. And all of a sudden, we're playing the championship game with the same dudes on that plane.
Yeah.
The Duncan Robinson now playing with Miami, Mo Wagner now playing with the Boston Celtics, DJ Wilson playing with Houston Rockets, all on that plane. I know it was a whole new perspective for them.
Crazy. Yeah. And you think about that, through this lens of resilience. And we got about 7-8 minutes or so left here. So if anyone's got any questions, go ahead, please dump them into the Q&A chat. I see one there right now, but maybe just one more quick thought on this notion of resilience. And so, you think about it, you told some of the story, to me, like when we interviewed you, talking about like the importance of, throughout your entire life, being resilient, the ability to learn from, to persevere through and adapt and overcome adversity. This is obviously something that folks who've served in the military learn a whole lot about. Any other thoughts about like military veterans and people from the military about like why, they are inclined to be good coaches?
No, and we need you. This is not a thing like I think you want to do this at any level. If you're I'm a social studies teacher because I had incredible high school coaches that changed my life. I just wanted to be like them and change other people's lives. And I'm telling you, like with Lieutenant Colonel Mike Erwin, my cousin, his Little League coach, had a big part of putting him in a position where all of a sudden he's at West Point. Whether you can have this opportunity to coach at the highest levels or coach at the lowest Little League levels, you are making an impact on people. And you've served your country so well, but you have a leg up on everyone because you know how it works. You know how leadership works. And so in going into this thing with this idea that leadership is not a position. Leadership is a lifestyle. And how you present yourself as you approach practice, as you go, you meet with parents, you do these different things during this thing, have nothing to do with here's how you throw a curveball or who's how you shoot a free throw. Everybody's watching you. And when you're out there portraying this confidence and this leadership, you're actually changing the world. And we need it. We need people to tell the truth in this country right now badly. We all know that. And you are the truth. When you're going out there and you're generally, there's 3 things that I teach now in my class about leadership. It's one, I call it the vet. After you guys, be a vet, but show vulnerability when you coach. When you make a mistake, don't, and that also means listening to others. Don't do it because I said so. Explain the why to them. Empathy. You need to have empathy with everyone. These young men and women are coming out of some unusual situations, very different from what we would think. And then transparency. Be open and transparent with what's most important. Be transparent with the parents. Meet with the parents. Once you get to my level, you don't meet with the parents too much, but you do tell them, I ain't meeting with you because you'd have to be at every practice. But unless it's about, if it's social concerns, psychological concerns, academic concerns, I'll meet every day of the week. We're not talking about playing time. But if you set the rules early, Mike Matheny wrote a great book, the Matheny Manifesto for Little League, about this is how you treat parents and this is how you treat coaches. Because every parent is going to want to get in there, and you got to sort of set some boundaries. But your leadership is so important, and you're changing lives. Just like Mike's was changed, mine was changed by a Little League coach. And it just starts people, you're really doing a big service.
It's awesome, Coach. And we got some awesome questions kind of pouring in, and I know we got limited time here before turning the mic over to Matt, but people are definitely fired up by the leadership is a lifestyle quote right there. I saw a whole bunch of comments on that. Someone asked a tactical question. I've always wanted to ask you this. During the 2013 run, you ran a 1-4 high play through Mitch McGarry to break a zone. What did you call it? And how important is language when you teach the game?
I think we called it 14 just because it was a 1-4. We crossed them, and it was the template to we didn't have much success against the Syracuse zone until then. And Mitch McGarry, he kept pivoting wrong all week in practice. We never would have beat Syracuse if we didn't have a week to get ready. you don't beat Syracuse on 1 day prep. You have to have a week to get ready. But he finally pivoted right in the game, hit some shots, and we had shooters everywhere. We had, Karis LeVert, who was a little freshman playing 10 minutes a game. Now he makes $15 million a year for the Indiana Pacers. People made shots, but it was it's a simple 1-4 set with people that dive and rotate once the ball is caught in the post.
Awesome. Keith asked a great question, Coach, about in what way, if any, has data analytics changed the way that you've coached your teams? So thinking about that.
I think I might have overdone it a little bit with the Cavaliers by buying too much into analytics because there are still, I'm thinking one time there's a situation where we're playing and we're not trying to take the in-between jump shot at all, threes and layups, and that's the analytics, the best shots, but you can't get them. And I'm watching both Kawhi Leonard and Paul George hit 15-footer after 15-footer after 15-footer after 15-footer, which you're never supposed to take. And I just look back at my analytics guys and are saying, I think some of these guys can take 15-footers. I think it's a good strategy because they're beating us by 50 right now, taking 15-footers. So, but it doesn't make sense that that's all you do. You have to get to that point. So I think there's still some coaching left where you like, and baseball, the same thing. I sit there and want to sacrifice bunts sometimes with my favorite team, the St. Louis Cardinals, and we won't do it, but I got to trust those analytics. But sometimes the guy's not a good enough hitter. Maybe it's better, so I think you gotta do it, but you can't get too much. You'd go crazy if you tried to do everything analytics is telling you.
Yeah. It's a little bit of the art and the science. Then just another question here coming from Tara and Manny talking about coach, is your culture you speak of faith-based? If not, now I know this, right? So you and I are both Catholics and actually you and I went to mass together on September 11th, 2020 when we were in Lower Manhattan together. Right. But can you maybe shed a little thought on that? I know there's been a lot of recently writing about the coach of Baylor, and some other coaches, certainly Coach Dabo Sweeney, but thoughts about the faith-based component and approach to coaching?
Well, yeah. I mean, personally, it's huge to me. It's everything to me. I have a Jesuit prayer book in my pocket as I coach. I diligently go through. I do the Jesuit prayers. Try and do it almost every morning. I do a thing called the Examinin, where you basically give gratitude for the day before. I have to keep that within, though. At the University of Michigan, we have many faiths there, and we can't push it on anyone. We just sort of have a moment before each game of reflection. We don't even call it prayer; we call it reflection, and after the game. But at the same time, it's huge in my life. It's Mike and everybody else, whoever has, it is the only way that I made it through all this time was my faith in God's will. And so many times a loss ended up being a win because I had that type of faith that I'm going to learn from this and get better from it. But it's huge in my life. And I don't know what people do without it. God bless you. If you can do it without it, you're a better man than me. But I've needed it for a long time.
Final question, Coach, before we turn it over back to Harrison and Matt. Great question here, talking about the importance of alignment between coaches, athletes, parents, administration, and some of the best ways that you found to achieve this. So again, like you talked a little bit about it before with parents and how you kind of set boundaries, but it's a very complex ecosystem to operate there. So any thoughts or guidance?
No, I think it's important. Be very transparent. Go to your athletic director, go to the principal, go to the head of the league, whatever. It depends on what you're doing. And get it out in the open, how you'd like to coach, what are his values, what are your values, what's important. Have a meeting with the parents and set the table. Listen, I think one of my I have a guy on my leadership class, he said his rule, because parents are running around, they can't always get their kids there on time. He says, my rule is be early, but if you're late, come running. If you're early, you don't have to do anything. But if you're late, get out of the car and start running to practice. That's his only rule with little kids, and I think that's important. But just simple things like that, so that and then when you make a mistake, just be vulnerable with it and make sure that those are, you'd ever ask for permission than forgiveness when it comes to coaching, and it's especially if there's NCAA rules involved. Double check and make sure you're doing the right thing, because it can get ugly real quick. if you don't follow, I urge everybody, if you get into college or high, follow the spirit of rules. Don't try. So many people trying to find a way around a rule. If you follow the spirit of a rule, you'll never get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, and absolutely. And on that note, Coach, I know that you were voted by your peers as being regarded as the most ethical coach in college basketball. Sorry, one more question that we got to squeeze in here. It's a quick answer. It's from West Point graduate, former Army basketball player Babe Kwasniak asked, and this might be difficult because we often have a hard time, picking a favorite kid. But he asked, do you have who is the best teammate that you've ever coached, and what made him that way? And I know it might be tough to kind of pick or choose one, but does anyone come to mind, and why?
I think in 17, when we went to the national championship game, those 5 guys were some of the best teammates I have ever seen. Duncan Robinson, Muhammad Ali Abdur-Rahman, Mo Wagner. Oh my gosh, he was absolutely incredible teammates. Xavier Simpson. That's just so everybody on that team, really, they had one agenda. I'm winning for the guy, my brother's here. That's all I care about is that. And all of a sudden, there we are in the net. I'm looking up in New Orleans or in San Antonio, and there's 70,000 people. I grew up literally playing on a telephone pole and in my backyard in upstate New York. And there we are coaching in front of 70,000 people. Unfortunately, Villanova was just too good, but that was the key. And those guys were some of my favorites. They were really outstanding young men that made it. You love going to practice every day because they were great teammates.
Awesome, Coach. Well, thank you so much for the time tonight. We really appreciate the dialogue. And Harrison, back to you.
Oh, thanks, Mike. And thanks, Coach Beilein, for dropping incredible nuggets of wisdom. I mean, we prepared everyone that was going to happen, but wow, that was mind-blowing. And we said it was going to happen. And this is like my favorite part of coaching too. One of my favorites is getting together and sharing these stories.
Yep.
Right? You said reflecting on the past and doing this together. So I love seeing the chat light up and everyone come together. Man, I really just love these evenings. So thank you so much for
this, guys. This has been an honor. I will, when you have more times and you want to bring me on, if you want to get some questions together and let them pile up and have me on a couple times a year, I'll be glad to come on again. It's just, you guys say the word and I will be there.
Awesome, Coach. You're already signed up. You don't even know it, but you're already.
And thanks to Matt being a part of this. Matt, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And thanks for your service to our country, and everybody out there. Thanks for the service to our country.
Well, that's a perfect segue because our next guest is a friend, Matt Eversman. So retired First Sergeant Matt Eversman personifies the qualities of duty, courage, and selfless service to succeed when ordinary circumstances become extraordinary challenges. So if you don't know, on October 3rd, 1993, Matt was placed in charge of a group of Army Rangers to lead a daytime raid against an eager enemy militia. His inspiring story of survival was immortalized in the epic film Black Hawk Down, which recounts the harrowing experience. For his actions on the battlefield, he was awarded the Bronze Star Medal with Valor Device. During his remaining time in uniform, he worked at the Army War College, taught at the Johns Hopkins University, my alma mater, go Jays, and was finally deployed to Iraq, where he lived with the Iraqi army for 15 months during the surge. He remained on active duty until May of 2008, when he retired after 20 years of service. So Matt is a published author of his book, The Battle of Mogadishu. He's also a professional speaker and a documentarian. His film about operations in Afghanistan titled Send Me aired on PBC Miami in October 2018. But most recently, he co-authored a new book with the famous author, James Patterson, titled Walk in My Combat Boots. Here it is. This book is incredible. So I encourage everybody to go get a copy if you haven't done so already. And we are so grateful to speak with Matt tonight about the inspiration, purpose, and effect of this book. We are so happy to see you tonight, Matt.
Hey, Harrison, thank you very much. And although, if I were sitting face to face, I might put you in a chokehold, because following up Coach Beilein after, his unbelievable comments is really unfair. You totally put me in the spot, man. So you owe me one down the road. But thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for tuning in and sticking around for a little bit tonight.
Well, I definitely owe you one, but it's not for that, because you are amazing and we are so grateful for you to be here. And I just want to say, in reading this book, we talked a little bit about it before offline, and it's heavy, especially for me as a civilian, right? It's just a great reminder of really what happens in the lives of service members and veterans and first responders, and really what that adversity looks like. And in fact, you had a great word. You said it's more like it's sobering, and it really is. What was like the inspiration for you, one, to team up with James Patterson to write this, and why write it as a collection of stories of what it's like to walk in my combat boots?
Yeah, so it's a great question. Couple of answers to it, which I wish I could take a lot of credit for it, Harrison, but truthfully, this is all Jim Patterson's idea. A little bit of an interesting background to it, though. As you mentioned, we went to Afghanistan in 2018 to do this documentary. And prior to going overseas, the producer said, "Hey, what do you think about meeting with Jim Patterson to sort of talk about storytelling?" And okay, I mean, that happens every day. So yeah, I think that would work. So like all good stories, it starts at a bar. We met at a bar and we chatted with Jim. And to land this plane, and I promise I'll get to the point, what Jim said is like, everybody's got a story. Every single person that is on this conference, every player you talk to or coach, everybody you meet has one really good story that every single one of us would say like, wow, that's really pretty cool. He's like, if you can get Matt, if you can get people to talk, they'll get there, man. Just take them where they want to go. And I mean, it was totally in earnest. It wasn't like, being a weasel. It was just do it. So we went over to Afghanistan, did this thing, and Jim saw an early, copy of the video. And I'm sitting in my office one day, and the phone rings, and it's like James Patterson. He's like, "Matt, Jim Patterson, how you doing?" "Good." "Jim, how are you?" "Hey, listen, I was thinking we should do a story about soldiers. What do you think?" And again, you're kind of like, this is shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, if the best-selling author in the world asks you to do a book with him, you say yes. No matter what it is, you just nod your head north south, say, "Roger that, sir, I'm in." So it really was his idea, honestly. But the more we chatted, though, Harrison, the sort of the idea was that we started in 2018. So at the time, we're 17 years of war, and Jim and I both were saying, people are still not affected by the war, by 9/11. Most people in this country don't really know any veterans, and it's not that they're bad or anything, they're just zig when you should have zagged. They don't, no one in their family served or whatever. And so we wanted to reintroduce those young men and women back to the communities. And as I think I might have mentioned earlier, Jim is the son of a World War II veteran. And he's like, I knew nothing about what my father had done. Literally, my father never talked about it. So we kind of a two-pronged approach, the idea that we could let people out in our communities and neighborhoods really understand when they see a veteran and they say, "Thank you for your service." Now we have a little bit of an idea about why we're doing and what that young guy or gal did.
Yeah. So you bring up an interesting point, how Jim Patterson just didn't really know the stories of his father, and he wasn't so quick to tell. And I mean, you have a collection of tons of stories in here. So how did you get these folks? How did you select these folks? And was it difficult to get them to tell these stories? Because these are deep.
Well, no, thank you. And listen, every single one of the veterans that are on tonight knows that once you put a quarter in us, we don't shut up. We just keep talking. Like, we're like, "Dude, man, time out. You're talking way too much." I mean, I have a nickel. If I had a nickel for every one of these soldiers that said, "I don't know why anybody would want to hear what I did nothing," I'd be a really wealthy guy. But to answer that question, in fairness to everybody and truthfulness to everybody, I started with about two guys that I knew. I'm like, listen, they're not knuckleheads. They could tell a story, even if I know it already. that's a good way to get started. But literally from those first couple, after we got through that first round of sort of verbal waterboarding, I'd say, hey, listen, you got any buddies that you think might want to tell a story? And it just took off. I mean, literally, it just took off, and it took off. And, it was at the point where I would say, like, listen, I got to make sure that we're being as equitable as we can. For instance, we got to make sure our brothers and sisters in the Marine Corps and our Air Force brothers and sisters, and I mean, I'm an Army guy, just, truth be told. So we wanted to get everybody and sort of get the width and the breadth and the length and the width all together on this. And then, to just let them have a chance, a platform. And I know that sounds sort of cliche and Hollywood weirdo stuff, but just let them talk. And I swear, as I'm sitting here, every single one, as James Patterson said, has an interesting story to tell. That young private that spent 15 months driving up Route Irish and Jackson and all over, 100,000 kilometers, of battle space, dodging IEDs every day, probably, arguably, in truth, saw more bad guys and dodged more bullets than any Delta guy, ever. And that's not a knock on anybody in this scale of justice. It's just this young private's like, I don't know why anybody would want to hear it. I'm like, dude, holy mackerel, you almost died about 5,000 times. You're amazing.
Geez, and when Coach Beilein was talking about transparency, and I hear this, it's like you start to be transparent, you start to open up. And I know for me, I like to talk. I'm a conversationalist, and I like to get stuff off my chest. And when I start to tell stories of adversities that I've gone through, it makes me feel good. Did you see an effect like that in the people that were telling their stories?
I did. It really is a great question. And when people say that was a great question, sometimes they're just like being like patronizing. But in this case, it really, Harrison, it's an awesome story because, as I said, a lot of them would lead in with, I don't know why anyone would want to listen to me, because we're taught to be so self-deprecating, and it's the team. It's not me. I don't have an I problem. It's we, and every single leadership, team building, cliche, we really, you all know it. I mean, it's cultural to us. So in one sense, you're like, yeah, man, maybe I had my leg blown off and I went back to the battle, a year later, but you should see what the guy next to me did. Like, it's that kind of mentality, but to the point, I will say, I would try and write everybody. We'd finish our interviews, whatever time of the day or evening. And once I sort of got everything transcribed and, hey, Harrison, thanks for, making time. With this book, I got a lot of immediate, they beat me to the punch with this. Hey, Matt, thank you so much just for listening, just for the opportunity to share a little something. We're all in a little bit of a pop culture world where sexy stuff is the big, if you're D1 versus D3, if I was using that analogy, like, we're all drawn to that, Boston Red Cap, Red Sox, shamag wearing mustache dude with tattoos and everything. But, there's a lot of young guys and gals that were just your typical soldier that did incredible things for this, Team America. And I think they almost didn't believe it. And so, like, telling them, and I don't want to sound like I'm freaking Dr. Phil or anything, but giving them that opportunity, I think was tremendously helpful. I hope it was anyway. I'm sounding a little self-righteous. I apologize for that, but I hope it was.
Yeah, and it's not self-righteous, it's just righteous, because, I believe the best gift you can give someone is your time and attention. And just by listening, man, like truly listening, that's a gift. And I think this book did that, right? You just have like this huge ear of the world.
It really did. I mean, it really did. And the more we got going, the more it just, again, it just spider webbed out. And, I would go over, I live in West Palm Beach, which is on the other side of the tracks. Jim lives on Palm Beach, which is on the nice side of the tracks. And so, I would go over every week with a big stack of manuscripts that I had transcribed, and I'd go through and sort of highlight the stuff that I thought he might get interested in. And it would get to the point where we would meet then, literally about once a week or so, just to not even to digest it, but just like, wow, because he's not a military guy. Like you all know. I mean, his father was a veteran, but he was like, Matt, is this, you got to explain this to me. This is unbelievable. And I'm like, Jim, you're hearing the transcripts firsthand. This isn't, the hyperbole. This isn't somebody making stuff up. This isn't Hollywood. This is about as real as it could possibly get. To that point, I'll shut up in a second, but that story, there's one in there about a nurse on a troop transport that would take him from Baghdad up to Landstuhl, Germany. So all the critically wounded, once they got patched up and they had to leave theater, they would go. And, she's trying to make sure that these patients are as comfortable as they can get in a big C-17. And, they're all kinds of banged up. And literally, she's talking about this soldier, this young Marine, that says, I just want to know, when can I get back? How long am I going to be in Germany? And she's like, sweetheart, and earnestly, she's like, sweetie, I mean, you don't have a hand. You can't go back. And all he wanted to do, literally, you can't make this up, was just be back in the fight, as scary as that was, with his Marines. I mean, my goodness gracious, it brings tears to my eyes just telling the story that I've heard about 57 times.
Yeah. And so that's the power of these bonds, right? And, sports is similar, not the same, not even close. But, when Coach Beilein's talking about doing this for your teammates, for your brothers and sisters that you're playing with, I mean, that's the epitome. And that story you just told, Matt, that is like repetitive through your book. I heard them, all these stories of folks suffering serious injuries. And, before even, the slightest bit of improvement, it's how can I get it back out there? I mean, some people were literally dying and talking about how can I get back out there?
Yeah, no, without, I mean, it's just, whether and I've thought about this a lot, since Mogadishu. I mean, that was 30 years ago. Kind of like, why do people do, I don't look under the hood. I don't know what's going on under there, but there's something beyond, as Mike said earlier, there's the art and the science to Coach's comments about building teams and the culture in there. And they're people far smarter than me clearly have figured it out. But I also want to say, and sort of as a, the 1-2 punch, I think there's something about the shared hardship. Maybe it starts in basic training. I think there's something about that crucible experience. Maybe it's a tough experience in the field. Maybe it's a ranger school or Q course, or maybe it's the deployment. I don't know. But, there's these graduations of really challenging things under this umbrella of a national mission, sprinkled in with some values on top, where we're like, what comes out at the end, it's pretty doggone unbelievable. So you can't make, to the point is, Harrison, you can't make that up sitting on a stretcher. Like, let me just kind of give this nurse a good line about something so she'll feel better. Like, no, dude, that comes right. That comes right here. It's not even so much here. It's all right from that heart. And I think this institution that we call the military, generally speaking, gives us all that great sense of purpose. Like I said, national mission, we got it. Chase down bad guys, got it. And within that, there's the values and everything that come together, which is I'm kind of hearing, and not my first rodeo with Soldiers Sidelines. It's a very natural transition into this new arena. Pardon the pun. Yeah, I'll do push-ups later, but it really is. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's, General George Casey said it best at one of our live seminars at Georgetown University a number of years ago. He looked at everybody in the room and he was like, folks, you're not done yet. You're not done serving, and so like coaching is the best way to continue to serve our country. We get to be out in the communities right now, like leading young people to be great citizens of this country. We can be diverse. We can be character-based. We can just model the right behaviors every single day. And you know what's so cool? Maybe they'll want to be like us, or not me, more like you, and serve our country. And enlist, because like you said, one of the purposes of this book is to let the public know what it's like to connect with a veteran and a service member. Well, what's a better way than actually being with them every single day on the basketball court or the football field or the soccer field? It's so cool.
Yeah, and Harrison, just to piggyback on that, the other thing that came out in this book, I think, and you all again that are listening, give me a little bit of rope here because I hurt myself sometimes about saying stupid things. But what I realized also about this book was that these, much like any doggone sports team in any place, anywhere in the country, these are average kids. And when I say average, I don't mean like clearly there are some gifted athletes with great talent and vertical leap and all that stuff, but these are kids from right next door. These are the kids from Paducah, Kentucky to Greenwich, Connecticut to Compton to Detroit, Natural Bridge, Virginia, you name it. They're all there, and nobody puts on a doggone red cape. They don't change in phone booths. They just come in, and what you do is you mold that. They sort of assimilate into this new environment. And again, I'm sounding Dr. Phil like walk with me here. So, they got it going on, man. But none of them grew up like, man, I'm going to freaking be a D1 athlete and I'm just going to go kick ass and take names, or I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be in Delta or SEAL Team 6 or whatever. Like, no, you sort of go through the school of hard knocks and you meet some good people along the way that influence you, coaches. And, what spills out at the end, though, is this amazing guy or gal that is like, maybe I made it to the Final Four, maybe I didn't. Maybe I was academic All-American, maybe I wasn't. But you know what? I got to learn about this love of my teammates. I got to learn about supporting the cause, and I got to do something that was, and not that this is not to be dismissed. I did something tough every doggone day. Sorry. I'll wash my mouth out later. I did something hard every day, and that is vital. And when you look at this book and you read these stories, they did hard stuff every doggone day. Hard, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything hard every day. I mean, that's toughness.
It's what it's about.
Here's a lesson.
It is. And that's what we're doing. And so now I want to just make sure we have some time for some of these great questions. And if anybody does have questions, put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A. And I just want to start off. We have one from John Walker. He says, "What's up, Matt and Ranger buddy?"
I thought that was John Walker. And you know what, man? That guy's got a mouth from the South. I love you.
He just wants to know how you've been since retirement.
I'm doing great. You know what? Better than I deserve. I'm blessed every single day. And, listen, life is full of luck and opportunity, and it's around every corner. And, highs and lows and ins and outs. But no, life was good. Everything is good. Thank you for asking, my friend. And, one of these days I'll get around Fort Bragg. We'll poke our head in.
And then, John Rue says hello. And he wants to know, in researching your next books, how has it compared to the first book that you wrote?
Yeah, so I will just say, John, sorry to put you on the spot, but thank you and your beautiful bride also. We're all punching above our weight, so you're a good man. Thank you for all your help. So this is the cat's out of the bag. I am currently working on our third project with James Patterson. This October, there's a book that will come out about emergency room and trauma nurses, which is spectacular. And I would just tell you right now, buy a lot of Kleenex, because you will be in tears reading about what these heroes do, and not just the COVID world. But to answer John's question, it's really the same. These are all frontline, hard hitting, pipe hitting, swinging, they get into it. They run to the sound of gunfire kind of people, so they really are the same. I was joking with a lot of the nurses as I was doing this research last year, nurses' heart, soldiers' heart, they're exactly the same. And, what we're finding with law enforcement, the same, it's that support of the mission greater than themselves, taking care of others, we before me, all that kind of stuff. It's been amazing. And I've found that, again, you almost gotta, really, really, get a little nasty because you're like, dude, talk to me. Tell your story. You've got something to say. And they're like, I haven't done anything good. I just saved a 2-year-old from drowning yesterday, but that was nothing. And I'm like, are you kidding me, man? Are you kidding me? This is what you do every single day. So anyway, no, John, it's going well. And thank you for all your support.
So, this wouldn't be a coaches social if we weren't able to break each other's chops. And one of our coaches tonight has to do it. And he asked the question, Coach Toy wants to know, Matt, who would win in a fight, you or Jeff Mellinger?
No, that's unfair, man. I mean, that's unfair. Although Jeff's got a couple of years. I mean, I like to think maybe I could maybe be a little faster than he is now. No, that guy's hard. That's hard. That's like, you just run away, just cross the street, go the other way and say, you win. Jeff is a great American, unbelievable patriot. He's a poster child for Team America, a great Ranger, iconic Ranger. And again, this all sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. I mean, Jeff is the quintessential Ranger, and I'll say this: our country is stronger, and we will sleep all better tonight, even though he's long retired, because of men like Jeff and the team that he built that put points on the board for Team America. Right, Grant Hendricks?
Well, I'm glad we got to end this on a little bit of a lighter note. And I know, Mike Erwin, could you do us a favor? If you are allowed to, are you allowed to put the title of your upcoming book in the chat so we can be on the lookout for it for a pre-release?
Absolutely.
Because we're going to get that right after we get Walk in My Combat Boots from Matt Eversman. This should be on everyone's bookshelf, and then be on the lookout for the next one. Because if it's anything like this one, it's definitely a must-have. And folks, I'm so glad we had, 86 people show up tonight and join in on this. I think that was the highest that we were at tonight. And I'm just so grateful for everyone's time and attention, because again, that is the biggest gift. And, I love you all. Thank you, Coach Beilein. Thank you, Mike Erwin, for helping set this up and moderating such a wonderful discussion. And of course, Matt, I consider you a dear friend now, and I'm just so grateful for your time and sharing all your knowledge. And
we share a barber.
Yeah, his name's Bick.
That's good.
Yeah. So, and also, look, thanks to all of our partners like USO, US Lacrosse, and of course Team RWB, and all of our sponsors as well. Companies like Higher Echelon make this happen, and everybody in this room makes this happen. Like, we support each other. We support each other with emotion and having each other's backs. And of course, the financial contributions allow this thing to keep going and getting bigger and doing more and more and more of this. So if you haven't donated recently, consider it. Go check out Team RWB as well. And I hope everybody has an awesome rest of their night.
Hey, Harrison, I got one real quick before you say goodbye.
Yes.
Listen, I would be remiss if I did not say Will Huff is a man among men who is just, thank you for connecting me, Will. And I appreciate you having me on. He's your guy, and you've done yeoman's work. We're blessed to have a guy like Will Huff on the team. So thank you. And Harrison, thank you, Coach Mike. God bless you.
I'm going to back that up. I'm so glad he's on our team. That is for sure. We're going to leave you with Kenny Loggins.
Nice.